We now discuss the degrees of accountability. It is often said that we are not living in a perfect world, for there are moments where we know that certain actions are wrong, and yet, because of some reasons or circumstances we happen to be in, we decide nonetheless to perform such actions. How do these reasons or circumstances we happen to be in affect our accountability for such actions? Accountability thus comes in degrees, and four factors generally form the basis for determining such degrees. So the four degrees of accountability are the difficulty or pressure, the intensity, the involvement, and the level of knowledge. Most of our actions, we always have some reasons and circumstances that push us to do the actions. Reasons or circumstances will not excuse us from the accountability, but will either lessen or increase the degree of accountability. We call these factors that lessen the degree of accountability mitigating, while those that increase it aggravating. We will discuss this one by one later on, but for now, let this be the template. Uh, if the difficulty or pressure is high, then the degree of accountability is low or mitigating. If the intensity is high, then the degree of accountability is high or aggravating. If the involvement is high, then it is high as well in the degree of accountability or aggravating. And if the level of knowledge is high, then the degree of accountability is high as well or aggravating. And if the difficulty is low, it is high, it is aggravating. And if the intensity is low, then it is also low, it is mitigating in terms of the degree of accountability. In terms of involvement, it is low and it is also mitigating. And if the level of knowledge is low, then it is also mitigating. So as you notice, it is only in the difficulty or the pressure which is inversely related, that if the action is high, then the degree of accountability is low. And if the action is low in terms of the difficulty, then it is high, it is aggravating. The rest are directly related. So now we go to the difficulty or pressure. The first is the degree of the difficulty or pressure that forces one to perform the actions that one believes to be wrong. In this case, the greater is the degree of the difficulty or pressure, the lesser is the degree of accountability. Or the lesser is the degree of difficulty or pressure, the greater is the degree of accountability. For instance, a person who steals a loaf of bread to feed his starving family, as what Jean Valjean did in Hugo's classic novel Les Miserables, has a lesser degree of accountability compared to a person who steals fortunes just to amuse himself, as what Thomas Crown did in the movie Thomas Crown Affair. So if you are hungry, you are very poor, though you are accountable, but your uh, difficulty is very high. There's a very high pressure because you are very poor. So therefore, even if you are accountable, your accountability, the degree of accountability is mitigating. It is low. As we say, it is somehow understandable because you are very poor. But it does not mean again that you are not accountable. You are still accountable, but it is mitigating. It has a lesser degree of accountability. But even if, but in case if you are rich, like in the other example, so therefore the difficulty or pressure is very low. There's no such thing as pressuring you to steal because you have a lot of money. So therefore your accountability is high because you don't have a difficulty or pressure in life. You have low difficulty. So therefore, you will be more accountable for your actions. It's very disgusting that a rich rich people will still uh, steal money from uh, the community. So it is aggravating. Now we go to intensity. The second is the intensity or the injury that results from a wrongful action. Here, the greater is the degree of injury, the greater is the degree of accountability. Or the lesser is the degree of injury, the lesser is the degree of accountability. For instance, stealing 20 pesos from a beggar has a greater degree of accountability compared to stealing 1,000 pesos from a billionaire, because the 20 pesos from a beggar is very big enough for that beggar itself. Therefore, the intensity of your action is very high. How come that you steal something from a beggar? Then, therefore, your degree of accountability is also high. It's aggravating. But if you steal to the billionaire, therefore, the intensity of your action is low, because what will do it for the billionaire if some of his savings will be taken away? So the degree of accountability is mitigating. Again, remind you that both of them are both of those actions are accountable, because we have the conditions of accountability, the knowledge and the intentionality. But here we were just talking about the degree of accountability, the level of your accountability. Next is the involvement. The third is the degree of one's involvement in the case of collective action. Here, the greater is the degree of the involvement, the greater is the degree of accountability. Or the lesser is the degree of involvement, the lesser is the degree of accountability. For instance, the person who intentionally and knowingly assists the murderer in carrying out his criminal action, say by providing the murderer from some information about whereabouts of the victim, is accountable to a lesser degree compared to the murderer itself. So your involvement is less in the murder because you are just the lookout. So therefore your involvement is low. Therefore also the degree of accountability is low as well. It is mitigating. But if your involvement is high, for example, you are the front runner of the murder itself, or you are the mastermind, therefore your involvement is very high and your degree of accountability is high as well. So you can think other examples in which you can have this template. Fourth is the level of knowledge. The fourth is the degree of one's knowledge of the wrongfulness of an action and the relevant facts. Here, the more knowledgeable one is about the wrongfulness of an action and relevant facts, the more accountable one is. Or the lesser knowledgeable one is about the wrongfulness of an action and the relevant facts, the lesser accountable one is. This explains, for instance, why for doing the same kind of crime, the law gives a lesser degree of punishment to a minor compared to a normal adult. The minor is considered having low knowledge, so therefore the degree of accountability is also low. It is mitigating, while the normal adult is considered to have high knowledge, therefore also will have an aggravating degree of accountability. So as a review, uh, we are talking here about the degree of accountability. For it assumes that you are already accountable for your action, and we are just assessing your accountability in terms of its level, if it's very aggravating, or if it's less, it is mitigating. And at the same time, as you remember, accountability is the deservingness of blame and praise. Therefore, we can have this template not just for blame but also for praise. For example, the intensity a while ago that I mentioned focuses only on the injury, but it can also be about the praise. If you top the exam, so the intensity of your action is very high, and therefore also the degree of accountability to be praised is also high because you top as the number one of the, for example, in the DUST scholarship. So it's not just about the blame but also of the praise on the positive note. And if you also remember the uh, conditions of accountability, we have the intentionality and then the knowledge. Once you have those two conditions, then you are already accountable, and therefore you can proceed in identifying the degrees or the levels of accountability. But once one or two of those conditions are absent, then you may no longer proceed into this degree of accountability because the absence of those conditions means that you are not accountable or the person is not accountable. So there's no need to level the degree of accountability. Oh, thank you so much for listening for our discussion. There are still many things to discuss and many things to clarify. Nevertheless, having learned accountability, all the more we need to balance this knowledge with our keen practice of critical thinking. That's it for today, and thank you.